improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Hey, this is Brad Colbert, the Iceman. Welcome to another edition of the Carry On Podcast, SITREP edition for the week of October 23rd. A look back at the week and some of the news highlights, and of course, as always, my undistilled opinion on them. And with that, let's jump right in it. I want to talk a little bit about Russian oil, specifically the fact that the United States just sanctioned two major Russian oil and gas suppliers, one private and one state-owned. Now, this is unprecedented to date. The U.S. has heretofore avoided targeting Russia's energy sector for fear of causing economic waves, something that Trump has obviously changed his mind on because we have put some major sanctions down on these Russian oil and natural gas providers. What does that mean for us in America? Well, Brent crude is already up 3 to 5, and we expect futures to reflect further instability. One thing markets don't like is uncertainty, and there is a shitload of uncertainty right now. Now, on the Ukraine side of the house, they are celebrating the U.S. policy, and they hope that it brings more pressure to bear on Russia to come to the negotiating table. On the Putin side of things, he's basically given us the Russian middle finger, which is a bunch of double talk and politics. He has said that the Russians will not be pressured, and no self-respecting country would expect them to be pressured to come to the negotiating table. Coincidentally or not, at the same time, Russia tested its nuclear triad. For those of you that are not up to date, a nuclear triad composes the land, sea, and air components of a nuclear deterrent or arsenal. Of course, in a exchange of weapons of that caliber, it's pretty much going to be the sub-ballistics followed by the land-based ICBMs. And then if there's anyone left, you have bombers, which are 30 to 45 minutes from target strike zones, launching theirs as well. So in the Russian side of the house, they decided to launch a land-based ICBM, and they launched a sea-based ballistic missile. Basically, they are testing their command and control network. Their nuclear triad is similar to ours with one major exception, and that is Russia has a deadband switch, something the United States does not have. Basically, going back to the Cold War, the perimeter system ensured that if Russian command and control was decapitated with a first strike, that failure to communicate with command and control would send out a launch signal to everybody else, guaranteeing that the world would be cooked 1,000 times over because there's enough nuclear material in the form of missiles, bombs, and rockets to pretty much kill the world 20 to 30 times. So they tested this nuclear triad, and it works. Great. No issues there. It was definitely timed. Russia says it wasn't, but it's extraordinarily coincidental that the same time we sanction their oil suppliers, that they test their nuclear capability. They say that it is nothing to do with our sanctions. However, almost since day one, Putin has signaled his willingness to use nuclear weapons, or at least brandish that sword. It's supposedly a last-ditch effort, but there's a lot of folks on the inside that theorize that he has no reservations whatsoever about using them if his back is against the wall. And what I've read on the open source side of the house seems to indicate the same thing. Now, does our resupply of weapons to Ukraine break that threshold? Probably not, in my humble opinion. And there's a lot more people that are smarter than me on this subject, is that he will probably not use conventional or theater weapons of that sort unless we join the war with Ukraine and or open up a second front, or provide weapons that threaten Russia's survivability. Now, Tomahawk cruise missiles so far have been off the table supplied by the United States, but the UK just supplied Storm Shadow long-range missiles to Ukraine, and they've recently used them to strike a pretty robust target package within the Russian borders. Hey, I'm all for it. If you can come up with a way to decapitate the logistical train of the Russian military, whether that's command and control, infrastructure, or logistics, you would love to do that. Sun Tzu said the best victory is one that you don't have to fight for. Unfortunately, that time has long passed. But if Ukraine, through the use of drones, some very clever tactics, and some long-range missiles supplied by the West, can stop Putin's war machine, I am all for it. I have said it many times before. I am not a Russian sympathizer. They have no business doing their dastardly little deeds on Ukraine, and any chance that we can get to try and bring them to the negotiating table or push them back, yeah, I'm all for it. It is theorized by many people that this could potentially escalate the war. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know how much more escalation you could go. Russia is currently in a protracted land war with Ukraine for over 2 years now, and there's atrocities on both sides. The technology that is being brought to bear is absolutely cutting edge with the use of drones and other autonomous vehicles, and I see no end in sight. So if you talk about escalating, really the only thing that's left on the table are nukes, and I just don't feel that Ukraine is capable of tripping a nuke threshold independent of some major support from the United States and its other Western allies. But we'll continue to keep an eye on that, as I'm sure the rest of the world will as well. I also think that it was interesting that for the first time in any of the sanctions packages, India and China both agreed to take a step back from Russian gas and oil and renegotiate some contracts, which either shows their willingness to bring Russia to the negotiating table, a fear of massive tariffs from the U.S. as reprisals. There are more there are more sanctions packages that Congress is looking at, which could target oil consumers of Russian oil with a pretty heavy economics package. So India and China may be looking at that and sort of redefining their policy decision on Russia and its continuing war of aggression towards Ukraine. Interesting. I think the implications are going to be that Russia isn't going to do shit. We're going to continue to turn the sanctions up, and it's going to be a slow and steady boil towards, I don't know. It is going to take 6 to 9 to 12 months for Russia to really feel any pressure from these sanctions. It is definitely a long game. I don't know if it's going to work, but hey, we'll find out. That's pretty much it for the Russian oil takeaway, unless barring any questions from the audience. All right. So moving over to the Department of War press. As we spoke about last week, we had about...
Wait. You said, I have one question.
Yes.
You had said something about open a second front.
Yes.
Expound on that, please.
Well, Belarus is in the area, and Georgia is in the area. It would be interesting if Russia solicited a neighboring country to engage on war on their behalf, by proxy, or if Ukraine decided to engage preemptively on a second front. So right now, you basically have the two sides in a land war, in a shifting front line between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, there's other fronts that could be opened. It doesn't have to be lobbing missiles over that front line. There's other vectors that you could engage each other in. They've done some stuff in Crimea. They've done some stuff to the Black Sea Fleet, and there's other. Yeah, I mean there's other fronts I think that could be open potentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about the UN's role in all of this, and how does that affect the circumstances surrounding everything that's going on right now?
I'm sorry, the who?
The UN's role.
Never heard of him. I don't know what that is.
What is your opinion of the UN? Just out of curiosity.
Well, they definitely have a fantastic building and some prime real estate in Manhattan, from what I'm told. And they've put on some lavish parties, and they look good in blue. But I think that's about all that they're good for. The United Nations, are you fucking kidding me? Name one war that they've currently stopped.
I can't.
Neither can I. I'm sure I could Google it. I'm sure AI could help me out, but I am reticent to find one conflict that a UN peacekeeping force ended.
Okay, so that's an interesting aspect, because they have been like the dialogue surrounding the UN, and specifically Russia's dialogue surrounding the UN, and how they don't want like Ukraine to become a member of the UN, and they don't want,
Right, UN or NATO?
Both.
Because I thought that the Ukraine was part of the United Nations.
I don't actually definitively know that. I don't think that they are.
Let's go to the Google machine and let's pin that down real quick.
Let's go to the Google machine.
Yeah, ask
checking. Okay. Is Ukraine? Oh yeah, I mean Ukraine was one of the founding members of the United Nations when it joined in 1929.
That's what I thought.
So NATO is the issue.
Usually, yeah. NATO's the issue. They're not going to get NATO inclusion. They're not. Under no circumstance. There's no version of this story where Ukraine gets accepted into NATO. Full period, stop, end of sentence. Okay. I think at this point, really, the only thing that you are looking at is, does Ukraine maintain its post-2014 border with Russia, or does it lose the 20% that Russia is currently standing on? That's really the only thing that is going to be fought. At some point, Russia will manufacture an excuse to claim victory, whether that's through a negotiating table or like they literally run out of ammo to fight with and have to make up an excuse to end the war. But they're going to end it on their terms. I don't think Ukraine is going to, unless it's not just, and I don't want to digress too deeply, but it's not just an issue of weapons. The Ukrainian soldier has been at war for 2 years. We're coming up on another winter. They are smoked. Russia has more people that they can throw at this conflict, and they have shown they're willing to do whatever it takes to drain prisons, do military conscription, and basically force people into this meat grinder. Ukraine has a finite supply of troops. So if this thing goes on for another year, it's going to be fought with less soldiers relying on more weapons from the West. If any one of those things becomes unbalanced, the Ukraine no longer has status quo. They're on the losing end. And I think Russia knows that. And I feel that that's what they're counting on, is that if they drag this out long enough, one of two things is going to happen. We're going to lose the appetite for it, or the Ukrainians are going to lose enough people. They just don't have anybody left to pull the trigger.
Yeah, they don't have the resources to sustain. And, that is interesting, because they've drawn in, if you look at Russia in general, they've drawn in the North Koreans, and the North Koreans have supplied people.
Yeah, a little people. See what I did there?
I do. I see. Magic, pure magic. Yeah. And that, the reliance on all of the other superpowers ultimately for Ukraine, when it comes to, because you look at all of the dialogue surrounding the kind of weapons that, the U.S. can supply and the kind of weapons that, blah, blah, blah. It just gets to the point where, Russia responds to, well, if you supply this, then we'll do this. And if you do that, then we'll do this. And it's just this weird chess match.
And it's money too. The Patriot missile is about $1 million a missile. That shit isn't cheap, but you can get a $300 commercial off-the-shelf drone, pack some explosives on it, and start launching them across the border. And at a certain point, it's diminishing returns. We can continue to turn our military-industrial complex to supply weapons to Ukraine, but there's a finite supply. As much as we do it now, it is, what happens when it's next year or the year after that? And we have spent a lot of money to try and get Ukraine's borders back. And I think something's going to give. I think Putin's definitely playing the long game on this one. And I don't think he cares. I don't think there's a whole lot that we're going to be able to do that's going to force him to withdraw.
It is interesting how the battlefield has changed and what that actually means to this war specifically, because like you said, like packing, a drone, $300 drone with explosives and, sending it into a fire team of, Russian soldiers or whatever, that that war is dynamic and that there's a lot of things that are occurring on a daily basis that, that reflects the technology and the changes that are occurring on the battlefield.
Yeah. And there's a lot of tech companies in US, in Europe, in Israel, where tech is, on the bleeding edge of tomorrow, that are looking at this as a laboratory. They're trying new things. And believe me, if you don't think China is watching what is taking place between the West and the East, you're mistaken. The United States is majorly losing the drone war. We're way behind. Everyone knows it. Hegseth actually made a statement about it several months ago. The U.S. is absolutely the supreme power when it comes to tech in all areas except for drones. And I think that this laboratory of war that Ukraine has turned out to be on the tech front is probably a foreshadow of how wars are going to be fought 5 years, 7, 8 years from now, especially when it comes to Taiwan and to China. I think that the technology is fascinating if you can sort of take out the context in which I'm discussing it, which is, pretty horrific. But it is a sounding board for some wild technology for war in the future.
Just as a side note to exactly what you just said is, where do you think AI plays a role in the future of war?
Huge. There's a company that just had launched, no pun intended, that just showcased a new autonomous escort plane that uses an AI called HiveMind. It's been used before. Previously, it was used to control F-16s. The company that made it and developed it had a bit of an accident doing a demonstration a couple years back with an F-16 with their HiveMind technology. There was a military service member whose fingers were almost completely cut off. And I don't know the circumstances under which it took place, but The company received a little bit of bad press, but they've since returned with a vengeance, and they have this fascinating new aircraft that is entirely autonomous. And I think kind of the model that a lot of first world nations are looking at is you have a manned aircraft with 2 autonomous AI-powered escorts with them, and they perform the role that a traditional wingman would perform. The nice thing about these autonomous vehicles, though, is you don't have to risk a live person. They require none of the training that a live pilot would require, the years of military flight training and tactics. And you can send them to do engagements that you would be reticent to do with human pilot. And all of this is made possible by an ever emerging and expanding artificial intelligence. And drones aren't new. We've been using drones since World War I, as a matter of fact. This is not a new concept, but the enhancement of AIs such as HiveMind is in allowing these autonomous vehicles to do, just mind-numbingly incredible things. It's really, really impressive when you look at it. And it is going to be the future of war. And our near-peer adversaries, looking at Russia, China, I hate to say it, but to a lesser extent, Iran, are going to be racing to provide cutting-edge solutions to the same problems that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. It seems like daily things are changing. It's pretty crazy. If you look at even the helmet technology that is coming out now, there's a recent and there was a recent news story about helmet technology that allows an individual to identify the enemy and behind walls and whatnot that can incorporate the entire field of vision.
Yeah.
And that is pretty intense,
Oh, yeah. The F-35 currently uses it now. Their helmet system allows the pilots of those aircraft to look through the floor, the back firewall, throughout the whole cockpit and see the outside, completely integrating external sensors with internal displays. It's really impressive. And all of this it comes at a cost, and it's definitely not something that a lot of second and third world countries are ever going to touch. And so this remains toys, if you will, for first world nations. And that means that the most likely conflict is between those, and it's going to be brutal.
Where do you see all of this heading? Like with China and with, we've got the Russia situation, we've got the China situation with Taiwan, and we've got, there's all the things going on with South America and the drug situation. What do you see personally as the motive behind all of this, or where, not even the motive, but where is this all going?
Well, I think it's the natural evolution. Again, there's people that are a lot smarter on the subjects than yours truly. You pick up a book, Gun, Germs, and Steel, for example, is another primer on where we've come, where we're going, and the natural evolution. And there's hundreds of books in the same vein. To answer your question, where do I think it's going? I think it's going to get to the point where, and this is my hope, and this is my opinion, I think it's going to get to the point where conventional war is incredibly easy to wage, but also incredibly stagnated, in the sense that it's this measure, countermeasure will become so refined, so technologically cutting edge that, much like three-dimensional chess, there's no winning move. There's no strategy that can't be countered. No one side has an upper edge on another. It's not going to matter, how many troops you have. It's really going to matter about your technological edge. And I think that because it is eclipsing our ability to understand how to use it, we'll fight ourselves to a stalemate. And in one way, that's great because it's a lot less costly on a human scale. But on another, as Star Trek, the original series did it. It kind of takes away the horrors of war and allows it to drag on for an indeterminable amount of time. That makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's fascinating because technology is moving at such a fast pace, and you start to look at like the stock market, and you start to look at where things are actually going up, and it's in the AI sector.
Yeah,
and you start to look at what China is doing as far as the power sources, and where the leverage lies, and it really comes down to, it really comes down to resources, and like you look at the power grid and you look at mining of the whatever it is that we need for lithium batteries, and you look at it's like it really comes down to resource and who has the much.
Yeah, it's not just physical resource though. It's also intellectual. Right now, the U.S. research apparatus, infrastructure, if you will. I mean, Livermore National Laboratory, the national laboratories, DARPA, the brain trust in America is way above what anyone else can currently bring to bear. But that edge, that advantage is shrinking. So yes, I mean, there are countries that have hegemony on natural resources that are used for, cell phones and microchips and high-end batteries. Yes. But there's also an intellectual, a scientific resource that is just as precious. And it is that I am also worried about, because without our research and development, without incredibly smart people at DARPA and the national laboratories developing technology that we will then engineer into a thing, we've lost.
So, okay, that being said, who do you think is leading all of that?
Well, the United States is at the moment. We have since post-World War II, and we continue to, but that delta is shrinking every year, and China is getting so close to eclipsing us. And in some vectors they are, and drone technology. There's a couple of other things outside the scope, but China is definitely the one in the room to watch. And if we don't continue to focus resources on education, on higher education, on trying to encourage some of these disciplines, we're going to lose that edge. And it has strategic implications. It's not just it's not just an economic thing. I mean, it's a strategy thing. There's a reason why China sends its students here to America to go to school. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So where do you see all of this going? Like, let's project this 10 years from now. Where do you see everything combined, like all the things that we've discussed in this moment? Where do you see all of this going?
I don't know. I mean, if I had the answer to that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be charging several $1 million to be a consultant somewhere. But I think that it's definitely going to come down to a couple of major world players, and China and the US are probably going to be at the table. And you're going to be, I mean, resources are scarce. Resources are finite, whether it's petroleum, whether it's, iridium, or other precious metals that are used for the manufacturing of batteries or whatever the case may be. Those resources are finite, and what do you do when they dry up? You're going to have some major superpowers staring over each other at the last oil field, and I don't know. To answer your question, and I don't mean to dodge it, is I'm not exactly sure. I could be Pollyannish and say that I hope that by that point in society's future, we have found another way to negotiate those finite supplies. But I'm also pragmatic, and I don't see that as being the case. And I don't want to steer this in another direction, but there's an elegant solution to all of this if humanity really wanted to explore it. All of the things that we crave, whether it's water or minerals, gold, they're in the asteroid belt, and it's not beyond the realm of human technology to go up, park an asteroid in orbit, and just mine it, send everything down. There's trillions and trillions of gallons of water up there if we wanted to grab it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's very, especially considering all the things that are happening technologically at this moment in time. I mean, that is a fascinating take on the whole thing. But all right, moving on.
Okay.
Let's move on to some short content.
We went from sanctioning Russian oil reserves to mining asteroids. All right.
But I do think that that's all relevant. I mean, it is interesting.
Yeah.
How it all connects. Because if you look at the assets that China has when it comes to minerals and any kind of substances that are relevant to battery production or whatever the fuck, it's like doesn't matter. It's like there is a massive landmass that is supplying the world with then you look at the oceans and you look at what's going on with the mining in the oceans, and you start to look at so the space is not an irrelevant subject matter to this whole thing.
It's not. And God, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole anymore, but I mean, if you really want to see where the next frontier is going to be, and wow, that is campy as shit to say it out loud, it's going to be space.
I mean, being a product of like the 80s, like the 80s culture. I mean, it couldn't get any more profound than that. We were living in exactly the thing that was projected that we would live.
Yes. My only regret is I will be too old or possibly dead to see any of this come to fruition, because I think it'd be great.
Oh no, man. You're gonna tap into eternal longevity.
I hope so. Yeah.
It's gonna happen.
I'll freeze my head right next to Walt Disney.
Alongside Ted Williams.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna switch gears for a moment here. We're gonna follow up on a story that was talked about last week, and that is the Department of War's press exodus and a reformation. So when last we left this story, the the Pentagon's press pool had staged a walkout, a permanent walkout. They bailed. There was a ultimatum issued by the Department of War, a la Pete Hegseth. You either sign this document, 22 pages, agreeing to a whole host of things, one of which was the crux of the walkout, which says you cannot report anything that was not officially released to you to report, which a lot of journalists took as an affront to the free press's charter to have full transparency and report the news. Now, the Pentagon says mainstream media has constantly perverted the truth, slanderized, leaked things they weren't supposed to leak, and we're done with it. Well, two of their biggest fans, which is Fox News and Newsmax, were also amongst the group of reporters that left. So if that tells you anything right there, it says that it was pretty universal. So for a segment of time, basically about a week, there was no resident Pentagon press pool. Well, that's changed. Officially, it has not been announced, but unofficially, there is some 60 journalists that have been signed on to go back into the building and become resident journalists. And they are from a disparate mix of independent and social media reporters. And some of these individuals are pretty out there in their reporting. Some of them have been conspiracy theory proponents. Some of them have been recipient of Russian money to try and publish stories that were pro-Russia. They are definitely far right in their ideology. And I'm a fan of my team. Okay. Right is right. Everyone understands where I stand politically, but this specific issue, it circumvents politics. It shouldn't be aligned with a party affiliation. It shouldn't be pro-Trump, anti-Trump. It should be neutral. And there's a lot of news organizations that are not. I get it. There's a lot of news organizations that have slant and some pretty heavy bias. But that's sort of the price of being in the business that we're in. We're public figures. You're going to be open to scrutiny, whether it's by people who, are on your side or against you. So anyways, all that to say, they have about 60 journalists from a variety of outlets, both magazine, radio, news, television, internet, et cetera, et cetera. But some of the folks that have made that up are pretty fringe in their ideology. So we'll see what that means. One of the things that I guess concerned about is that, first off, there's a lot of things, and I said this last week, that the Department of War is doing that the public would like to know about. And I'm not talking about, top secret technological innovations that are taking place or classified information at the secret or top secret level. I'm not saying that transparency should go that far. I'm just talking about normal everyday things. And if you basically pack the jury with people who are on your side, then you're not going to get an unbiased report. Telling people that they have access to information, but only if it's an approved source, it tailors the narrative to what you want people to hear. It bends the truth. And I just don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's healthy. And we talked about this last week, so I don't want to redo it. But the two of the individuals that were asked to join the resident pool were Fox and Newsmax, and both of them said, no, thank you. If that doesn't tell you anything, then I don't know what else. Lindell TV, Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, he has a TV network. His reporters are in there. Just the News, Turning Point, USA's, National Pulse, Human Events. Some of these organizations I've never heard of, and I don't consume their content, not for any reason other than the fact that, hey, there's a lot of people reporting news out there, and there's so many hours in the day, It cuts into my drinking time if I have to watch 24-hour news. Too much. So there's been a couple of individuals that have gone on from the Pentagon. There's been a couple of Pentagon representatives that have gone on to the shows of some of these newly included people, and it's fairly sycophantic. So I don't know. I think the whole thing is going to become an echo chamber. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope that it doesn't affect the level of reporting. I hope that journalists take a honest and hard look at the news that they're reporting, have a little bit of integrity, have a little bit of neutrality, for God's sakes. And part of the problem, and I hate to put this back on the press when I'm trying to defend them, is you kind of brought this on yourself. You brought it on yourself because you constantly turned news into entertainment. And when you did that and you stopped reporting the facts unbiased, you lost the credibility of the people and you alienated your center of gravity. Your center of gravity was your integrity. And you put that integrity up for ratings. I mean, I hate to say it, but you did. You know, let's look at CBS. CBS News used to be the paragon of credibility. For God's sakes, Walter fucking Cronkite was the most trusted man in America. If he said something, it was taken like it was coming from God himself. Now, if you fast forward to 2025, first off, any jackass with a microphone has an opinion and suddenly a platform to express it on. The second thing is, as I said before, the media, you've taken news and you've perverted it into entertainment. That's not what this was supposed to be about. So there's a certain responsibility on you for this coming to fruition. Now, having said that, this is a gross escalation of a response, you know. So it's unfortunate. It's an unfortunate turn of events all around. And when and if something happens regarding this, I'll be sure and squawk about it. But for now, I need a refill. I'm dry. So once again, for the Carry On Podcast SITREP edition, I am Brad Colbert, the Iceman. And until next time, stay frosty.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome.